The new generation of game consoles has arrived. For some, it's an opportunity to witness what the next few years of video games will be like, while others would rather wait until a big system seller comes around. Whatever the reason may be, people will inevitably shift from one generation to another, even if it takes them 5 months, 5 years, or whenever the stores decide to restock. Then it's a race to be the fastest finger on the internet. In my case, what I want to see in a brand new console is, how far back can this machine play? Can it play the classics I loved when I was a kid? More importantly, can I carry over hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of games from the previous generation to the next? I want to guarantee that my investment will be worth it in the long run. What I'm looking for is backward compatibility. I've scoured the internet and found countless comments in YouTube videos, forums, and social media posts about the argument against having backward compatibility as an essential feature. I'm not here to make you love backward compatibility. People have different wants and needs when it comes to purchasing a new console, which range from having the best exclusives, the best value, or having the best version of FIFA or Call of Duty. What I want is to let people understand why people like myself would think this feature is awesome to have in modern consoles. As time moves forward, playing older games can get tougher. Eventually, it would become difficult to play games on their intended hardware. Most people will attempt to emulate games by using not exactly legal third-party software. That's not to say I haven't done that sort of thing in the past. It's something I want to change for my channel going forward. Unless I'm left with no other choice, I wouldn't use third-party emulators to use as an example for my videos. With that said, I wanted to grab footage of a childhood favorite game of mine from the original Xbox. Unfortunately, my 15-year-old self thought it was a great idea to give away my console. On the bright side, I still have my 360, so it's able to play a sizable library of old Xbox games. Although, the price for obtaining even one of them is less than ideal. But I bit the bullet, not only because I want to relive my childhood memories, but because this combo pack is a great example of early modern backward compatibility techniques. All rise for the national anthem. Released in early 2002, Jet Set Radio Future is a sequel to Jet Set Radio that was originally developed for the Sega Dreamcast, but when the system failed to make a dent in the console market against the PlayStation 2, the title was reworked for Xbox, alongside Sega GT 2002 and several other Sega titles. The Xbox 360 is unable to natively play original Xbox games due to the latter using a completely different architecture from the former. To remedy this, Microsoft decided to use emulation software in order to make original Xbox games playable on 360. And before anyone asks, the early PlayStation 3 models were able to play all PS2 and PS1 titles because the parts in the PS3 also contained the CPU and GPU of the PS2. And look where that took them.
$599 US.
With that in mind, the port for Jet Set Radio Future and Sega GT 2002 isn't perfect. While both titles are functional, there are some technical issues, such as flickering textures and frame rate taking a nosedive when activating a booster. Plus, the combo pack has a major flaw where freezing will occur in the game selection menu. I wasn't sure if it's because my 360 was getting old or if it's an oversight by the emulation team making this combo pack work, but it's a common enough occurrence that put me off from playing more of this game unless I reacted fast enough to choose the game I wanted to play. Why wouldn't Sega just make these two games backward compatible to systems beyond the 360 or re-release them in some form? At first, I thought Sega just hates releasing games that aren't Sonic, Persona, or Yakuza. After looking into it further, I have a couple of ideas. Firstly, licensing. There is a lot of music from a variety of artists that I can't play due to licensing. These pieces are so old and so scattered across different record labels, it would be difficult and possibly costly for Sega to relicense every song in the game. Well, why not just re-release the game with a different soundtrack? Because the soundtrack is so ingrained in fans' memories that having a brand new track list for a hypothetical re-release would be seen as an inferior version of Jet Set Radio Future. Finally, and I think most importantly, this combo pack. It wouldn't be too much of an issue if these were separate discs, but I'm playing these two games on the combo pack, meaning I'll be seeing this menu and dealing with freezing issues. On top of that, porting classic Xbox games to the 360, let alone the Xbox One, was hard enough, so imagine how much tougher it would be to port a combo pack that relies on the original Xbox architecture to function. In hindsight, I may have screwed myself for choosing the combo pack rather than finding a standalone disc in the event that Jet Set Radio Future and Sega GT 2002 become backward compatible in the future. I want these titles to come back in some form, as much as the next person, but I understand the difficulties in making the impossible possible. My dreams of playing these two games on modern consoles will remain as such for the time being. I've told this story before in my Battletoads video regarding the video's creative process. It was originally a review that mainly focused on the Battletoads reboot and lightly referred to similar titles in the same genre. That is, until I decided to play the classic Streets of Rage games in order to capture footage and gain insight on the beat-em-up genre. What ended up happening was, I was introduced to a brand new series I didn't think I ended up loving, but here we are. The Streets of Rage Vintage Collection is as the name suggests. It's a collection of classic Streets of Rage games available on the 7th generation consoles. I've already talked in detail about what the series is all about in my Battletoads vs Streets of Rage video, so if you want to know more about it, I'll leave a link of the video in the description. The emulator it's running on is meant to simulate how these games ran on the Sega Genesis in the early 90s. So the footage for Streets of Rage 1 is as choppy as it plays compared to its sequels. This raises an interesting question. When attempting to bring back a classic franchise via a compilation, do you want to improve on what's been done before, or do you want to preserve everything, flaws and all? It's a difficult decision to make. On one hand, it would be smart to enhance the frame rate of the first game and maybe update the visuals from sprite work to hand-drawn visuals, kind of like the re-release of Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo in 2008. On the other hand, much like my Jet Set Radio Future example, it could potentially become a more inferior product if any changes were made to the original experience. In this collection's case, I believe preserving an art form as intended by the original developers is the best option. It would be nice to see an artist's fresh interpretation of an existing work, but sometimes it's best to not attempt to improve on what's considered perfection in a fan's eyes. I've talked about Scott Pilgrim vs. the World a few times in this channel's history. I mean, this is one of my games of the decade after all. I can't describe how ecstatic I felt when Ubisoft announced a re-release that comes with the main game and all of its DLC. Due to licensing, I wasn't entirely confident that this game would ever see the light of day again. But it happened. Unfortunately, not every game gets this treatment. Transformers Devastation is a game published by Activision and developed by Platinum Games. Yes, that Platinum Games. For those who don't know, there was a time between releasing games like Bayonetta and Nier Automata, where the developer was releasing licensed titles such as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Legend of Korra. Much like any Platinum Games title, Transformers Devastation is a hack-and-slash action game that uses the Transformers IP. For those who love Generation 1 Transformers, I would highly recommend finding a physical copy, because it's a game that doesn't deserve to be lost in time. Yes, Transformers Devastation was delisted from digital stores in 2017, 2 years after the release date. The only way to play this game now would be by finding a physical copy or having the foresight to purchase a digital copy before being delisted. This Transformers game isn't the only game that has been delisted. I've mentioned Scott Pilgrim before, but it's far from the only game pulled from digital store shelves. The Deadpool game was pulled. Even the Marvel vs. Capcom games were pulled at one point until only UMVC 3 came back. Eliminating one way to purchase a game, in my experience, would result in price hikes for physical copies without a digital alternative. Seriously, this game is 5 years old. There's little reason that Devastation is priced at $40 other than greed. But if you really want to play this game at this moment, it's either this or nothing. When I talked about Scott Pilgrim in my Games of the Decade video, I wished for the game to come back in some way. Months later, Ubisoft is planning to re-release this game with all of the post-release content. While it's relatively easier to find a physical copy, I hope the gaming gods hear my pleas and bring a Transformers Devastation back from digital limbo. In November 2018, Xbox hosted their first Xbox fan event in a long time, since 2006. This event typically contains the latest information regarding hardware, software, and services Xbox provides. News range from the acquisition of game developers Obsidian Entertainment and In Exile Entertainment, the release date of Crackdown 3, a number of games coming to Xbox Game Pass, and most importantly, a number of Final Fantasy games coming to the Xbox platform, including the announcement of Final Fantasy XIII becoming backward compatible with Xbox One systems. I could talk about this game's shortcomings and where it ranks among the rest of the game in this massive franchise, but that isn't why Final Fantasy XIII is in this list, so I won't talk about it here. Final Fantasy XIII, along with the sequels, became backward compatible on Xbox One a week after its announcement on XO18. However, this isn't just a standard back-compat job. Back in the previous generation, Final Fantasy XIII released on PS3 and 360. The PlayStation 3 version ran at 720p, while the Xbox 360 version ran at an abysmal 576p. The cinematic cutscenes, meanwhile, ran at 720p uncompressed on PS3 thanks to the Blu-ray media the console utilizes. The Xbox 360 ran them at 720p as well, but it's more compressed due to the limited space across 3 DVD discs. On Xbox One X, the gameplay resolution has been improved over the 360, and even the PS3 version at 1728p. It's not exactly 4K, but it's a much needed improvement over the previous generation's resolution. And the cinematic cutscenes? While I wasn't able to find any concrete information in my research, the cutscenes appear to be comparable to the PS3 version. These enhancements aren't entirely exclusive to the Xbox One X. All of the higher resolution cinematic cutscenes are also available on Xbox One and Xbox One S systems. With these enhancements, the Xbox One X version of Final Fantasy XIII is the definitive version. One can argue that the PC version is always superior, but it does come with some caveats at launch. Okay, that sounds great, Brainiac, but what does this all mean? Why did I go over the improved technical aspects of Final Fantasy XIII instead of the game's story, gameplay, and other important topics that matter to gamers? Because this aspect of backward compatibility opens up a brand new door not everyone's talking about. Remastering old games at no extra charge. Remasters are not a novel idea. Developers would take a game and update textures, giving it a resolution bump, and occasionally add new content to make the remaster worth the purchase. This treatment is usually reserved for anniversaries of games, such as Halo Anniversary or Gears of War Ultimate Edition. Nowadays, just about any game released from the previous generation ported to current-gen hardware are considered remasters, despite looking similar aside from a resolution bump. The work done for the Xbox backward compatible team went beyond what was meant to be a way to play an old game. Now, Final Fantasy XIII can be experienced by players under a brand new light.
We believe that games, like books, movies, and music, should be celebrated and enjoyed by countless generations. We're passionate about preserving and celebrating the games you own, the classics of the past, and the genres you love to play.
Fanboyism aside, this quote from Xbox boss Phil Spencer sums up why I support backward compatibility. For centuries, mankind has attempted to keep a record of nearly every single piece of work in existence, and gaming is no different. Some would rather let the past be the past and move forward toward the future, while others are willing to keep the memories of these games alive for as long as possible. I can only speak for myself, but having access to these games is the right thing to do. Backward compatibility, in my opinion, isn't simply a way to play old games on newer systems. It's a way to play the games I grew up with, discover new favorites from previously dormant franchises, preserve potentially forgotten relics, and witness games who didn't get a fair chance at release breathe new life years later. You can stick to playing with your new toys, and I'll stick with playing the classics. Cause that's the way I like it.
Like this, like that, like that, like this, like this, like that, like that. I like it, I like it!
Over the course of several months, I've challenged myself into creating videos with levels of editing and writing like I've never done prior. I am proud of everything I've created thus far, as it shows that I'm getting the hang of writing, editing, and storyboarding videos. However, there remains one project I want to take on. I had this idea of creating a video series long before Misfit Tangents became a thing. I made a promise to myself. Once I became experienced enough with YouTube, I'll tackle this project. Over 25 videos later, and approaching 3 years of experience, I believe I am ready. If you want to see what's next for me, hit the subscribe button and check out my socials in the description and towards the end of the video. For now, I'll leave you with a small preview of my next big project. I hope you'll join me on this long journey.